nodules on a legume and outlining their significance in the management of soil fertility. So this is a relatively straightforward dot point, mostly because you have to identify what nodules look like on the legume, which you can see here. So past paper questions have often labeled or given you an image, and you need to label nodules and show where they are, and then talk about how having nodules on a legume and having bacteria in them fixing nitrogen helps in managing nutrients in the soil or soil fertility. So first of all, we need to know what legumes are, and then we'll have a look at what nitrogen does, what nitrogen fixing bacteria are, and then what rhizobium is. These here are the nodules, these little circular bits on the roots. They're like swollen bits on the roots, and they are the nodules. These have been infected by Rhizobium bacteria in this case, or nitrogen fixing bacteria, and they're either found in the soil or they are put on the seeds, like in a coating on the seeds when you plant legumes such as lucerne. So let's have a look first at what legumes are. There's more than 1,000 species of legumes in Australia, but common ones are soybeans, lucerne, peanuts, etc. If you just remember a couple of examples, that will be perfect. Legumes basically, or their nodules, house nitrogen fixing bacteria, of which pretty much most of them are Rhizobium, or the most common one. So firstly, let's have a look at what nitrogen is important for. Nitrogen, N, which is N, of course, the main nutrients needed for plants are N, P, K in that order, nitrogen being the one that's needed in the largest amounts. So nitrogen is essential for the growth of the plant, DNA production, and protein production. And so you can see, obviously, those are the key things that occur in plants. So nitrogen is needed in large amounts, and legumes are unique in terms of plants because they can produce, through the help of rhizobium, they can produce their own nitrogen. Other plants simply take nitrogen out of the soil and it needs to be provided for them, but legumes can actually add nitrogen to the soil from nitrogen gas in the atmosphere, so they are unique in that way. So let's have a look at nitrogen-fixing bacteria in general. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria form a symbiotic relationship. Now again, we've looked at symbiotic relationships before, but symbiotic means that they both benefit. Now, the plant provides a place for the bacteria to live, and it also provides carbon compounds for the bacteria to survive on. And then the bacteria will provide nitrogen for the plant to use. So nodules, finishing this, they form a symbiotic relationship with the roots of legumes like clover or these other examples we gave up here. Nodules are created when bacteria infect the growing root. Either the bacteria, as I mentioned, is in the soil or it's put on the seed as a coating when you plant a legume. The plant supplies carbon compounds to the bacteria for it to grow, and the bacteria convert nitrogen gas from the atmosphere into nitrogen in the soil, which is the nitrogen gas in the atmosphere cannot be used by plants directly. And so that's what makes legumes unique and their bacteria unique, because they can take the gas from the atmosphere, turn it into usable nitrogen in the soil, in the ground, that other plants simply can't do. So when leaves and roots of the legume decompose, the soil nitrogen increases in the surrounding area as the nodules on the legume break down in the soil. And so particularly we're going to look at Rhizobium, which is a bacteria, and this is the main one really that is a nitrogen fixing bacteria, Rhizobium, and it is the one that's mostly found in legumes. So you need to really remember the name of this to write in an exam answer. So they are bacteria, as I mentioned here, that convert gas from the atmosphere into ammonium, and the bacteria secrete enzymes to actually cause the conversion to happen, and that's nitrogenase. So that's basically the dot point, but we're going to have a look in a little bit more detail. Here we have some different species, and we have different levels of irrigation for those different species, and the amount of nitrogen that is fixed into the soil in kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. And you can see the variety here. And once we have graphed this, here, we have the amount of nitrogen fixed by different crops. We have chickpea, no, not irrigated. We have faba bean and faba bean here. This is not irrigated. This is partially irrigated. We have lupins, that is not irrigated, and then we have soybeans, which are fully irrigated. So obviously, not irrigating a crop is much easier and cheaper than irrigating. So it seems here that according to this graph, that lupins out of these plants are the best at putting nitrogen back into the soil from the atmosphere. So, and that's without irrigation as well. So that is quite a good amount. Now, when I created this graph, I made a bit of a mistake. So hopefully you won't do the same thing. But I needed to get to 220 for lupins, and I only put it to 200. So this is not good, having this above the chart. But if you can avoid that mistake, that would be good. You can see here, comparing faba bean to each other, you have non-irrigated faba bean, and then you have partially irrigated faba bean. Now, one of the reasons why faba bean will put more nitrogen into the soil if you irrigate it is because if you irrigate a plant or a crop, you will get more growth. Obviously, the more photosynthesis can occur, as we learnt in previous dot points. The more plants will grow, more leaf area, and therefore the plant can put more nitrogen into the soil. So that is the reason why irrigation makes a difference, even though we are growing the same plant here. So from the table and graph, which species fixes the most nitrogen, the answer is lupins in this case, quite simply. Compare the amount of nitrogen fixed for irrigated versus non-irrigated. So it's about a third more, as I said here. Partially irrigated faba beans fixes an extra 36 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, which is almost 50%. So that's significant. And then, as I mentioned, the reason for that is because irrigation means more inputs, more photosynthesis, high NAR, and therefore the plant is larger and can fix more nitrogen. Describe the process that occurs in legumes resulting in the fixation of nitrogen. Rhizobium bacteria are found either in the soil or inoculated on the seeds, as I mentioned, when legumes are planted, sprayed as a coating on the seeds. These bacteria infect the roots of legume plants, form swellings known as nodules. This relationship is symbiotic as the plant provides carbon for the bacteria, and the bacteria provides nitrogen change from gas form in the atmosphere to a usable form that the plant can access. And lastly, describe why legumes are a useful plant to be used in crop rotations. Because legumes are fixing nitrogen, they will actually replenish the nitrogen in the soil, while all other plants will actually take nitrogen from the soil. So that is a key difference, and why it's important to, as you're considering a crop rotation, that you might do a legume as part of your crop rotation, and you'd include other things that take nitrogen, and your legumes will put nitrogen back into the soil so that it's more sustainable. If we look at past HSC questions, most of them are around maybe identifying what nodules are. So here's a multiple choice question from 2016. This shows the nodules or the roots, the swelling, nitrogen. What is the name of the bacteria responsible for nodule formation? It is Rhizobium. What is the function of root nodules on a legume plant? And they contain bacteria which convert nitrogen gas into nitrogen-containing compounds. It has nothing to do with water. They don't store chemicals for root growth, and it's not to do with proteins either. What is the role of Rhizobium bacteria found in root nodules? They provide extra source of nitrogen, nothing to do with water, nothing to do with plant pathogens, and not energy for root growth. What name is given to the spherical swellings on the roots?